Hello and welcome to another episode. I am Brian, the Unskilled Commander, and this is Deck Break It Down, where I take one of my decks, break it into its component parts, walk you through what I thought of when I decided to build a deck, how I tried to veer it into a certain direction in terms of building it, then show you the key cards within each of the sections inside the deck. Whether or not it works, that's up for debate. But today we are going to look at Kemba Kha Regent, one of my absolute top 3 favorite decks. We've done a deck tech about this one before, but this is the upgraded version with a lot of cards have changed, and I've loosened some of the rules on the deck. Originally, I really didn't want any creatures in it that weren't cats. I have since, relented. Since Kemba is one of my favorite decks, it pained me that she didn't win as much as she should have because I was being held back a little bit by the restrictions on cats. So I have put in creatures that are not cats, and hopefully that will help buff up the deck and get her win rate just a little bit higher. As with all of my decks, I don't want to win every time. I don't want to win half the times. I just want to be able to win 1 in every 4 games, 5 games maybe, so I can keep the fun of it going. Nobody wants to lose every game. So, with Kemba Kha Regent, she is a 2/4 for 3 mana that says at the beginning of your upkeep, create a 2/2 white cat creature token for each equipment attached to Kemba Kha Regent. This is a mono white deck, so obviously we have to get over the hurdle of not having any kind of ramp and white being notoriously bad at getting your land drops. But we've taken steps to try and prevent that. Let's go through and see how. First up, we got 12 creatures. Not that many, but as I said, I've altered them to try and benefit Kemba as best I can. We've got things like Stone Giant now, where you can pay 2 and tap it to search for a specific equipment and automatically put it onto a creature. We've got Pure Steel Paladin. You can draw a card when it enters, and the equipment you control have 0 equip cost as long as you have 3 or more artifacts, which within this deck, that should be pretty easy. Angara the Diplomat, another good thing for card draw, so whenever opponent casts their second spell each turn, draw a card. When they attack with 2 or more creatures, draw a card, things like that. We've got Alms Collector, which was always in the deck. If an opponent would draw 2 or more cards, instead you and that player draw a card. We also added Codsworth Handy Helper. Commander creatures you have Ward 2, so that's a good way to protect Kemba. You can tap it to add 2 white mana, but spend it only on casting equipment spells. And better than that is you can tap it to attach an aura or equipment to target creature you control, activate as a sorcery. So now I can play an equipment, tap Codsworth to automatically equip it to Kemba, not worrying about the actual equip cost. Use that on something that has a high equip cost, which now allows me to play 1 or 2 more artifact equipments and hopefully get them attached. So it helps speed up the ability with which I can equip Kemba. Then we've got some stuff that just helps buff, like Regal Caracal and King of the Pride, that just buffs my other cats. Next up, we only have 2 sorceries, Gift of the Estates and Remember the Fallen. Remember the Fallen just tries to get a creature card or an artifact out of your graveyard, so if someone blows up your best artifact equipment, use that to get it back. Gift of the Estates just helps you try and adjust with the lands, because if an opponent has more lands, you play that and you can go get up to 3 planes, put them in your hand, and shuffle. Next up, we have 10 instances. These are pretty much all about protecting Kemba. We've got Teferi's Protection, Surge of Salvation, Ghostway, Gadriel's Dismissal, Flawless Maneuver. It's all about giving her hexproof or indestructible or phasing her out when someone targets her, then bringing her back. Comeuppance to try and prevent damage. Chroma's Will is a great one, especially if you have Kemba out. That gives all of your creatures pretty much every keyword practically. All the best ones at least: Flying, Vigilance, Double Strike, Indestructible, Lifelink, Protection from all colors still in the turn. And of course we have a Path to Exile in there just to try and help us deal with other board states. But as you can see, it is pretty much just about, it's self-focused. Getting Kemba out, equipping the hell out of her with some really great equipments that you're about to see, and swinging in for commander damage. Now we move on to the artifacts, and we've got a whopping 29 artifacts. Now I do have some mana rocks in here. You might wonder why, because it's a monocolored deck. I've got Arcane Signet, Bonder's Ornament, Commander's Sphere, and granted those probably could come out, and it might be an experiment down the line to take them out and add in an extra planes or 2, and then some better creatures and or equipments. However, I still think that mana rocks are mana ramp. Sure, I don't need Arcane Signet because I only have white and it can tap for 1 of any color. But if it hits, especially if it hits early, same with Soul Ring, of course Soul Ring's in here. You get that in the first 3-4 turns, it can help set you up for later in the game when you need mana to either recast Kemba or cast a bunch of different equipments and equip them all at once and swing in before someone can stop you. Otherwise, the artifacts are essentially about a few that deal with card draw like Endless Atlas, but the rest are designed to buff up Kemba as best as possible. You've got your key ones like Grafted Exoskeleton, which gives +2/+2 and Infect. So if you can get Kemba up to 10 power, including the Grafted Exoskeleton, and swing her in, now you're one-hit killing instead of trying to get her up to 21 commander damage. Commander's Plate gives it +3/+3 and has protection from each color not in your color identity, so that gives Kemba protection from everything except for white. Champion's Helm helps protect her +2/+2. A quick creature is hexproof if it's legendary. Silver Shroud costume, another one that when it attaches gives them Shroud till end of turn, but more importantly, a quick creature can't be blocked. That goes along with really well with Trailblazer Boots. A quick creature has non-basic land walk. Using that to try and slip past people's defenses, make Kemba unblockable. We do have a few swords, but not a ton. We've got Sword of the Animist, a key card for any monocolor deck except for green, really, because a quick creature gets +1/+1, and whenever it attacks, doesn't have to deal damage. Just as soon as you declare attackers, you search your library for a basic land card, put it on the battlefield tapped, and shuffle. Great way to get lands out when you need them. Then we've got Sword of Feast and Famine, Sword of Fire and Ice, and Sword of Hearth and Home. Each one gives +2/+2 and a protection from 2 different colors, so black and green, red and blue, green and white. And then an additional ability for each sword that's basically card draw, or target player discards a card, things like that. Just really it's the protection, and the buff is more important. We've got Pearl Medallion to try and make all of my white spells cost less. Now, of course, as we've seen, we only have a handful of creatures and things that aren't artifacts, so making them cost 1 less doesn't help that much. However, it does help reduce the cost on Kemba if you need to have the commander tax on her from her getting blown up or exiled or whatever. Then we've got some new things like Pip-Boy 3000. When the equipped creature attacks, you get to choose one of the 3 things. You can give her a buff, you can draw a card, discard, or untap up to 2 target lands, which allows you to play more things. Prowler's Helm, again, making her unblockable except by walls. Things like that. Finally, we have 11 enchantments. These basically tie in with the equipment and such, where it's buffing her or giving her some sort of protection or making equipping her easier. So of course, we've got Sigarda's Aid. As soon as you cast an equipment and it enters the battlefield, you may immediately attach it to a creature without having to pay its equipment cost. We've got Mantle of the Ancients and All That Glitters. Both of them do almost the same thing. They give a +1/+1 to target creature for each artifact and or enchantment you control on All That Glitters, and gets it same thing for Mantle of the Ancients. When Mantle of the Ancient enters the battlefield, you can return an aura or equipment from your graveyard and attach it to a specific creature. So that's really nice. That's why it costs a lot more than All That Glitters. We've got Flaming Fist, which helps give Kemba double strike. Flowering of the White Tree is a great one because it gives her Ward 1 and a big buff, along with all non-legendary creatures get a +1/+1 buff. So any little cats that I'm making on the equipments attached to her on the upkeep now become 3/3s instead of 2/2s. Land tax, at the beginning of your upkeep, if an opponent controls more lands than you, search 3 basic lands, put them in your hand, shuffle. So that's a great way to deck thin and catch up on lands, or just get ahead on lands so you're not missing land drops. Speaking of lands, there's nothing too crazy in here. We got a Rogue's Passage, which is highly needed. Another way to get her through unblocked. And then we've got a bunch of ways to go get more lands, so Mirrored Landscape, Evolving Wilds, things like that to try and Escape Tunnel, the new one, so that you can sacrifice them, go get basic planes. Obviously, you could just put basic planes in there. However, I like it because, to me, it's deck tuning. Now I'm taking 2 lands out of the deck instead of just 1. We also have something like Tyrite Sanctum, which taps for colorless, but you can pay 2 and tap it to make a target creature a god and put a +1/+1 counter on it. Then you can pay 4 and tap it later on to sacrifice Tyrite Sanctum and put an indestructible counter on target god. So you can make Kemba a god on 1 turn, next turn give her an indestructible counter. War Room is great because it's a monocolored deck to help you draw cards. Pay 3 and tap it, and then pay life equal to the number of colors in your commander's identity. That's only once. You're paying 3 mana, tapping it, taking 1 damage, and you get to draw. But there you have it. That is my Kemba Kha Regent commander deck. Definitely, like I said, my top 3. I love it. I've had it the longest out of all my decks. It was probably the 2nd or 3rd commander deck I've ever made. Gone through a lot of changes over time, but I'm really proud of it and really pleased with how it's turned out. I love giving it little upgrades, and I love giving it the fancy cards because it's being one of my top 3. I'm trying to trick it out. There's certain cards I don't believe come in foil or full art, so it probably won't ever get the full treatment. But over time, I slowly try and upgrade each card to something a little fancier. You have a Kemba deck? Do you have any cards you'd recommend? Do you think there's some cards in here that should come out? Let me know in the comments, and I will see you next time.